Members, we have a quorum and it is the appointed time for the meeting. First of all, I'd like to ask you to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of December 2014, and that's in papers CB bracket 1, 392/14 to 15. The Secretariat has not received any proposals for amendments. Can we please confirm the minutes? Thank you. Next information paper issued since the last meeting. There was one, and that's in CB 1, 391/14 to 15. It is a submission. We have forwarded it to the Complaints Division for follow-up. If there are no questions, we come to items for discussion at the next meeting. Please refer to CB bracket 1, 384, bracket 01 and bracket 02. May we now invite the administration to come in first. We are going to have the next meeting on the 2nd of February. There will be two items. One, PA briefing by the STH. Another one, Head 711 project, number B757CL, roads and drains in Area 16 and Area 58, Sha Tin. Any views on those items for the next meeting? If not, let's get on with the next item for discussion, and that is the long-term housing strategy. We have two papers. First of all, CB bracket 1, 352, bracket 01, and another one, CB 1, 384, bracket 03. I'd like to welcome Professor Anthony Cheung, Secretary for Transport and Housing, Mr. Stanley Ying, Permanent Secretary, and the rest of the team. First, I'd like to give the floor to the administration to take us through that paper. Chairman, on the 16th of December last year, we announced the new LTHS. This is the first LTHS paper since 1998. We have also issued at the same time the LTHS implementation milestones as at December 2014. We have detailed the latest progress of the various major areas of policy. All papers have been distributed to members on the day of issue. And from now on, every year, at the end of the year, we will issue such implementation milestones. In drafting the LTHS, we have considered the views of the steering committee. We have also availed ourselves to the views gathered between September and December 2013, and also the Electrical Subcommittee on the LTHS, as well as the Director of Audits and also the PAC's views with regard to allocation and use of public housing units and also planning and construction of public housing units. We can say that this is the product of wide consultation. We have adopted the steering committee's views to change our mindset towards public housing. We are going to have a supply-led situation so that we can avert the current supply-demand imbalance. And also, taking stock of experience, the new LTHS will seek to be flexible. We can renew the projection on demand every year so that we can have a rollover 10-year housing supply target, and so that we can timely reflect the changes in social, economic, and demographic situations. We will set the target at 480,000 for the 10-year period from 2015-16 to 2024-25, with the public-private split of 60-40. Accordingly, the public housing supply target will be 290,000 units, comprising 200,000 PRH units and 19,000 subsidized sale flats, whereas the private housing supply target will be 190,000 units. We adopt the supply-led strategy, and in the next 10 years, we will be inclined towards supplying public housing. So this shows the resolve of the administration in order to rebuild the housing ladder, and we are going to play an even more essential role. There will be three main strategies. One, to increase rental housing so as to respond to the need of grassroots. Two, we are going to build more subsidized sale flats, so there will be better circulation, so that there will be many different ways to allow people to own their own flats. And of course, the private sector will play a buttressing role, so more families will be able to own their own homes. Number 3, through continuous land supply and also to implement demand-led measures or demand-side measures, we are going to stabilize housing demand. The LTHS confirms the major framework. It is a starting point. It is not the terminal point. We are going to go down that route in order to plan for and deliver the targets. When the land resources, human resources, and other resources are still lacking, there will be difficulties, of course, but then taking the supply-led approach path, we will be able to consolidate different resources so we can coordinate different parties and secure social support so we can resolve problems and also deploy resources in a suitable manner. In terms of land supply, up till now, if all the land sought can be rolled out for building purposes, then in 2015, 2016 to 2024, 2025, we can build up to 254,000 new public housing units. But we can also have a net return of about 7,000 rental units. And according to the third quarter of 2014 projection, we'll be able to supply about 74,000 first-hand private housing units in the next 3 to 4 years. This is a record high. In the land sites that we have identified, we have to rezone some of them before we can use them for housing. We'll continue to work hard. We'll continue to search for land in order to achieve the 10-year supply target. We hope that in terms of site search and rezoning, the public can have an open mind and support the target of the 10-year LTHS. The public authority is the main organization providing public housing. In order to make sure that the HA has enough resources in order to achieve its targets, the FS announced on the 18th of December that the government will establish a housing reserve so that we can have enough money for housing. And also, the $27 billion, which is the fiscal return on the government's surplus investment, that will all be fed into the housing reserve. And apart from these, we'll still have to face the challenge of the capacity of the construction industry. In other words, we have a manpower problem. Some of the views were that we could have different kinds of tenancy control, rental subsidy, or the doing away with subsidized or subdivided flats. People who said this would like to have a shortcut in order to help people who are renting accommodation, especially those who are inadequately housed. Now rentals are high and there are many subdivided flats. We understand that we cannot sit with our arms folded facing such a situation, but if we only look at the symptoms and rush into taking some measures, we are not going to solve the problem. The main part of any strategy is workability. In other words, we have to help in order help those people who we want to help instead of taking measures that would only do more harm than good in the future. If we provide rental subsidy, it will only be for the owners to also increase rent so that people who pay rent will be in even worse dire straits. We have to provide supply continuously so that we can check the imbalance between supply and demand. Ever since the announcement of the LTHS, and that is in the last 3 weeks, we could see that there is general support in the community. There are worries, of course, that whether we can really achieve the targets. The deep-seated housing problems cannot be resolved without paying a price. If we cannot rezone any land, if we cannot increase the development density, if we can never resume land or reclaim land from the sea, then we'll never be able to have enough land in order to achieve our LTHS targets. There is also a causal link between all these factors. If we only dwell on incessant disputes and arguments, we will have to do some trade-off. between housing lack and housing supply. If we only continuously involve ourselves in arguments, we'll never be able to chart a way forward. Now, so that we can give our next generation better housing environment, we have to show some determination now and not hesitate anymore. Thank you, Secretary. Time is limited, and I'd like to give more time for members to ask questions. And the first round will see members having 4 minutes. Wong Kwok Heng, Tony Chair, and many more members, about 8 or 9 members are in the queue. Depending on the time available, I will allow a second round. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng? Or actually, Mr. Ip Kwok Him, I think the Secretary read from a script. Can he please give us a copy of his script? We can make the arrangement. The clerk asked, but then the Bureau said that the delivery would only be made available after the Secretary has spoken. Can we now have it? Yes, please, because he has already delivered it. Mr. Wong Kwok Hing. Thank you, Chairman. This LTHS has been published. I welcome it, and I thank the administration for it. At the beginning of this LegCo session, my motion was carried in urging the administration to draft an LTHS. That was supported by members, and now it has been realized. I welcome the final delivery of this strategy, because previous terms of governments did not want to write out such a strategy. But having said that, I have 2 questions for the Secretary. Number 1, the administration has finally agreed to build more PRH and revive the building of HOS. That's something good. But frankly speaking, there are quite a number of grassroots who are living in subdivided flats and compartmentalized housing, and they may have to wait more than 10 years before they can have public housing. Now, I'd like to return to the issue of tenancy control. The Secretary said it is not possible, but the FTU would like to say that you don't have to use a broad brush. You can draw a line somewhere. If you pay $5,000 a month or $60,000 a year, then if you're within that boundary, if you live in a subdivided flat or partitioned housing or even so-called coffin accommodation, then maybe you can have some rent control of such accommodation so that people who are in dire straits will be protected.
So can a study be conducted, and can you not turn us down right away? And also the Secretary said just now that for private homes there will be more supplies. And lately we have seen the distribution of forms for HOS, and about 200,000 application forms have been distributed. So it is obvious that HOS is very popular. And you said that for subsidized sale flats, there will be a richer supply. And what do you mean by that? You said that there will be an increase of 10,000. So can you tell us more about that, Secretary? With regard to Mr. Wong's 2 questions, first of all, about the grassroots, in particular those living in subdivided units or SDUs. Yes, the government understands their dire straits, and we have spent a lot of time to look at this issue, trying to decide whether rental control should be imposed. But as pointed out in the LTHS paper, after consideration, we believe that this will only lead to less supply, and rental level will go up as well. No matter which category of housing would be subject to such rental control, there will be such a phenomenon, and there will be a lot of disadvantages. This will be a major policy change. In the long run, it will have an impact on the housing market, and we should not underestimate it. So for rental control, this is what we have considered. We hope that we can promote best practices in this area. As for supplying more diversified subsidized sale flats, this is one of the major directions that we put forward in the document. We have put together a framework, and there are different types of subsidized sale flats. We adopt an open attitude. As for the 10,000 units in the coming 10 years, we will be allocating them under the category of subsidized sale flats. As for the details, we will be looking at them later. Chairman, I would like to add a word. The FTU suggests that for those who are paying a rent of $5,000 or less per month, there should be a rental control. This is not an across-the-board measure, so I hope the government can consider it. Mr. Jia Wei-chin and then Mr. Ibrahim. Thank you, Chairman. I support that the government put forward the LTHS, and now it has formulated a policy for the coming 10 years in terms of housing supply. So there are numbers of units that are targeted to be produced. It is hoped that suitable and affordable housing will be provided to the public. So for public housing, I think indicators should be formulated. For example, the average area that a person should live in. But how about the private market? As indicated in the documents, you have talked about appropriate and affordable housing, and what you mean is PRH. So do you mean that private housing should also be more or less at the same level? Now a person should enjoy at least 7 square meters. But how about the private markets? Because they are building smaller and smaller flats. So I think in terms of LTHS, you should also formulate a standard, that is the average size that a person should be entitled to in terms of housing. And also the government says that it would also make use of the force in the private market so the housing supply be enhanced. So can you tell us more about that? 2 questions. First, about affordable and appropriate housing. In our paper, we say that, well, for PLH, now we think that it's up to the standard of providing appropriate and affordable housing. But for different communities, they may have different standards. Internationally, there is no unified standards. I believe last year at the LegCo there was also a debate in this area. So for the private market, buyers have different choices. If we have enough land supply for housing, then the private market would also be able to produce flats of different sizes. In Hong Kong, the greatest challenge is that we do not have enough housing land supply. So that's why some developers are building smaller and smaller units. I think this problem can be resolved by supplying more land. Secretary, I would like to interrupt. Now, because you want to produce about 400,000 units, so the flats are getting smaller and smaller. So in terms of identifying sites, what measures do you have in place? Do you have targets? If you don't have targets, then how do you know how much land you would need? Well, the developers can build smaller units, then the number of units can increase. So can the secretary answer me in these areas? As for the sizes of flats, I remember in the past few years there have been a lot of discussions in the community. some people were worried that developers were building units that were too big for the markets. So that's why now developers are building smaller units. Of course, that has also to do with the increase in property price. Now, some people hope that they can afford their own homes, so they do not mind buying a smaller flat. But of course, if these flats can meet the standard of PRH levels, that would benefit the community. Mr. Ibrahim? Well, the government has published the LTHS report, and I welcome it. I agree to many points in the paper. For example, supply-led, flexible, practical, etc. Because this is the greatest concern of Hong Kong people at the moment. And can the Secretary answer 2 questions of mine? Just now in your speech, you said that in order to solve housing problem, larger size should be secured. Because if you want to bake a loaf of bread, you need flour. So we are not just talking about reclamation or agricultural land. Can some green belts be also turned into housing zones? Then that can address our land shortage problem faster. Because if you want to develop a new site, that would take much longer time. But of course, if you develop green belts, a lot of people may object to that. For example, the green groups or people living in the vicinity. Lately, I've been talking to Wafu Estate residents, and the Chifu residents objected to the government's proposals because they think the green areas near their developments would be affected. So can you make better use of land without causing troubles to the residents already living there? And that's another question. That's about the PLH supply. Yes, you will be redeveloping some estates, and you will also be re-establishing a progressive housing ladder. But we've discovered that when it comes to vacant flats, there are about 10,000 in PLH. So can that problem be resolved first so that people waiting in the line can be housed as soon as possible? For the provision of land, yes, if there are bigger sites in newly developed areas, of course, that will be a good guarantee for our land supply. However, in the coming 10 years, when we look at big size, we don't have a lot. For example, in NT Northeast, we need at least 10 years to develop a big site. So we definitely have to identify sites in areas that are already developed. So the HA would also be looking at lots of different sizes. Later on, maybe Mr. Thomas Chen can give us a more detailed answer. As for vacant flats in PLH, I think the percentage is now 0.5. Maybe our colleagues can also supplement in this area. Mr. Thomas Chen, can you supplement? Thank you, Chairman. As the Secretary pointed out just now, yes, when it comes to land supply, in the long run, we really need to develop new sites. So that's why we are now having a number of major projects. For example, the development of NT Northeast, Hong Shui Kiu, Dong Chong, etc. And also, in the long run, we will be looking at the further development of Lantau Island, the construction of the artificial island, etc. So these are major projects in the coming 10 years. So within the coming 10 years, we need to carry out all these projects. In the short and medium term, we need to adopt other measures. For example, some areas already developed, but how about areas in the periphery? Maybe we can also consider developing such zones. Mr. Leung Chi-chung, I support the government's long-term housing strategy. This is a very important policy for our future housing supply. But I think there are still problems that are not solved. For example, you say that there will be 290,000 PRH units produced. But you still haven't found land for about 40,000 such units. Well, last time you said 47, now it's 48. So how can you find land for all these units? And you have added 10,000 units. So where can you find land for that? When we published the LTHS, we have also provided a progress report. When we look at the coming 10 years, we want to produce 480,000 units in both the public and private sector. So for the public sector, there will be 290,000 units. So we haven't identified land for 36,000 units at the moment. In the coming 10 years, well, actually now we are in the initial stage of these 10 years. We hope that we can work hard with the community so that we can identify sites for these units.
Well, what you say sounds strange. You talk about the community. You mean you identify the sites and only with the community support can you use those sites, is that right? Well, yes, indeed. Because if we need to rezone the land, we have to have the community support and the agreement of the town planning board. At certain sites, we may want to apply for increase of density. When we communicated with the people on the ground, those are concerns of the people. As I said at the outset, if we all have an open mind, if we all want to increase housing supply in a short while, then it will be much easier in implementation if we have the consensus. And also, you said at the outset, Mr. Secretary, that in terms of housing supply, you are worried about money and manpower. We understand the manpower situation. It's very difficult, I think, to find sufficient manpower to realize your game plan. Now, you lack manpower and you don't have money because you have to come to LegCo for the money. Are you confident you can secure LegCo's support? Mr. Chairman, talking about cash, I think we are talking about public housing. And as I said at the outset, the FS has already established a housing reserve. We will be putting money in phases into this reserve. Hopefully, we can then support the HA in terms of cash supply for building public housing. And at a certain stage, if the HA applies to the government for injection, then we'll have to go through the established procedures, meaning the FC of the LegCo. If the LegCo and the administration agree that we need to increase housing supply, then there shouldn't be too much difficulty. Dr. K.K. Kwok and then Mr. Fernando Zheng. Chairman, we will never stand in the way of public housing building, talking about cash. I don't know how to congratulate you, because if this is an academic paper, then it's quite a good academic paper. But there are over 260,000 people in the waiting list. After reading this paper, you tell them there will be 10,000 units more after 1 year. Using your way of doing mathematics, these people will not be able to have public housing in the next 10 years. Not to mention, there will be new applications every year in the next 10 years. You have idle land, and the last Secretary for Development has already said so, but you are not delivering. Well, that aside, you can do something with your policy area. We read in the newspapers that there is, again, the call for tendering at a railway station. You have the ability to work with the MTR-CL in order to build more HOS. This will not have a negative impact on PRH. Such superstructure development has been decided to be for sale purposes. So why are you still dragging your feet? We are talking about this superstructure at a railway station, and also the MTR-CL is rolling out other projects. Remember, the government holds 77% of the shares of MTR-CL, and you have appointed so many directors to the board of the MTR-CL. So why are you not delivering? Why do you not release the land for people who have been waiting for so many years? Secretary. Chairman, MTR projects are projects for the private market. In the next 10 years, we are going to provide 480,000 units, including 190,000 private housing units. And as the government, we have to make sure that there will be enough supply both in the public and the private market, or else there would be a lot of volatility in the market. We are going to increase 10,000 public units. We did not do it arbitrarily, but we have looked at latest housing demand, and we have projected the figures on that basis. So we did not do it arbitrarily. If we have a 6:4 ratio for 480,000, we will have 290,000, which are public housing units, out of which 200,000 are PRH. And we are still saying that people should wait an average of 3 years for the first offer. We, of course, have exceeded that line a little bit recently. As for sale units, we will be looking for land earnestly. This is our target. And of course, the latest batch of HOS will only offer 2,160 units, but we are going to try to do it systematically. Chairman, for those who are waiting and who cannot afford a unit, whether it be a private unit or an HOS unit, it makes no difference to them. Those who apply for HOS, and I'm talking about the white form applicants, they are not eligible for PRH. If you want to solve the housing problem, you can offer them HOS or private housing. What you are doing or saying is irresponsible. In fact, there are no barriers on your way, unless you tell me that when the MTR-CL asks for injection from the administration, you will give them money to build a railway, saying that it is a public body. But now when we do not have adequate housing supply, you say that is only for private housing development. I think that is absolutely irresponsible. Next, Fernando Zheng. After that, Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you. C.Y. Leung said that housing is the most important policy in his term, but his term has seen half already passed, and in fact, it is a record high for 260,000 people to be in the waiting list. And Mr. Secretary, you also said that it was a record high. And of course, there are two other highs, meaning rental and property prices. I think C.Y. Leung has finally succeeded to make housing unaffordable to Hong Kong people. And Secretary, when you have an LTHS, it should go in the way or direction of providing appropriate and affordable housing for Hong Kong people. And you should also concretely define what you mean by affordable and appropriate. And now you are leading us up the garden path. After a lot of hot air, we don't see any actual targets. How can property prices and rental become affordable? There are no indicators. There will be an increase of subdivided units. You said half a year ago that there were 70,000, and now in the latest LTHS, we now have 80,000. They are all over the place. Not even the umbrella revolution is so widespread. In Chengchao, Pingchao, people have to take ferries there, and yet if it is a subdivided unit of just 100 square feet, people are paying $3,000 for it. So do you think Hong Kong is still livable? Everything is for speculation. There is vacant housing and first-hand housing. A lot of it has been bought for investment purposes. But the LTHS doesn't point to these problems. Secretary, you say you can't do anything. You don't want to impose tenancy control. You can't have a vacant housing tax. You are not going to levy capital gains tax. You cannot build too much HOS because you don't have land. I think you are the opposition party because you are telling us there is nothing you can do. What are you going to do to solve the housing problem of Hong Kong people? Secretary, Chairman, I cannot agree with Mr. Zheng. He says that this term of government has created these three highs. In fact, supply is limited and the rents are high, but it is not for us just to say we want to increase supply. If we want to increase supply, we have to go through a procedure. We have to find land, and that takes time. Even if you give us the land today, I cannot turn it into housing tomorrow. It will take a few years. So we cannot just wield a magic wand and give you housing. The thing is, the community, the government, and the LegCo must agree that we want to increase supply by a wide margin, and we have to work on it. Indeed, rental is still increasing. We don't want to see it happen. But the root cause is that this is an owner's market. We don't have enough supply. If we only look at the surface and if we say rentals are high, so we impose rental control. And in fact, in July, we did a report on rental control, and a lot of risks have been identified. If we just rush into tenancy control, rent can go even higher, and it will not be beneficial to the renting public. I don't have a lot of time. Please ask the Secretary how he can solve the problems. Will this LTHS guarantee that 10 years later, Hong Kong people can have appropriate and affordable housing? Secretary. We mentioned in the LTHS that we are going to build 480,000 units in the next 10 years. This is our projection according to the latest demand projection. We believe that is a reasonable target. If we can really provide 480,000 units in the next 10 years, given we have the land, and if we can do it within that time frame, then we are of the view that we'll be able to check the quite serious imbalance that we see now. Kwok Wai Keung and then Mr. Vincent Fang. Thank you. We have a lot of people on a small piece of land. I have been hearing that from very young. Housing is always our biggest problem. The LTHS is an important document telling people how serious the shortage of supply is. I think we can see it from the figures. We have at least a demand for over 400,000 units, and we are saying we can only resolve it in 10 years' time. Of course, we have to do it step by step because you have to find the land and all that. Well, that we can understand. But then you have to do something quick in order to tackle this dire problem. You have to tell me how you can put out this fire that is already burning. If we always have to wait for you to build housing in order to tackle the supply and demand situation, then for those who are really suffering, who are in subdivided flats, I think this is not acceptable to them. The FTU said that you could have rent control for those who pay less than $5,000 in rent every month. I hope you will consider that again. In fact, the news said recently that some owners are overcharging tariff. They are bullying the subdivided flat tenants, and they charge them high rent and also overcharge electricity tariff. Look how they are suffering. They are grassroots. They are already in SDUs. And yet you don't seem to show any sympathy towards them. You don't even have any short-term stopgap measures. In the LTHS, you said that to allow the rental market to develop healthily, even if we don't have rental control, people can enter into agreements, and documentation should help to make the market more reasonable. But how can you make sure that there will be tenancies signed for every rented property? People don't enter into tenancy agreements because they want to save on stamp duty. Therefore, how can we help SDU tenants? How can we help to protect their interests? How can we make life more bearable to them? Will there be short-term measures? Will you legislate to stipulate that tenancy agreements have to be entered into for small units, including SDUs? Will you also set up tenancy committees to tackle straightforward arbitration, so there will be more protection for SDU tenants? Secretary, I said many times what the government thinks about rent control. It is not that we are not concerned with rent increase, but the basic cause is really that supply is tight. That is the root cause. When supply is tight, if we go into rent control arbitrarily, the supply will even become tighter and rent will go up even higher. This is not something we want to see.
Well, that being said, you may say that the problem can never be resolved. But if we just impose rental control arbitrarily, that's just like adding fuel to the fire. So we have to target the root cause. As for the rental market and good practices when it comes to letting properties, we agree that good practices should be promoted, and later on we will be doing this. Now, when will that be? Well, LTHS is a framework for our future development. So we have put forward some directions. We will definitely follow such directions. Mr. Vincent Fang. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, I welcome the LTHS report. When it's compared to the previous government, at least our present government has a plan. Well, because this is a very complicated policy. If we have more housing supply, there will be higher demand. If you do a better job, the housing demand will be higher. When I look at paragraph 6 of your paper, you are saying that you will be providing 480,000 units and 280,000 of them will be PLH units. You have already identified sites for building up to 254,000 units, and within such a short period of time, you are already able to secure land sites for building such a large number of PLH units. I think that's a success. So in the coming years, I think there will be no problem for you to further secure sites for building 30,000 more units. But do you have enough manpower to build such units? Now, you have been producing PLH by tendering. So can you find enough workers to work under such tenders? And also, as Mr. Chair said, How about the size of the units? Now, because you have to produce such a large number of units, so in the future, unit sizes will become smaller and smaller. But only by doing so can you provide this number of units. So will the price go up again? Can people afford such units? And Secretary, I have another question. Maybe this is not within your jurisdiction. I think now there is a site which is for military use. I have talked to the military, I have talked to the Development Bureau. In Shakong, we have a large site, and now it's for military use. Can the government talk to the central government so that this site can be given back to us? Then we will have a huge site for housing development. In terms of manpower, I hope that you can do something about the importation of foreign laborers. And for the 90,000 subsidized sale flats, are they HOS? Have you considered selling some of the PLH units? Chairman, with regard to the military site, Mr. Thomas Chen can answer that question. Yes, when it comes to manpower supply, yes, that's a huge challenge. In the coming few years, other than housing, there are also a number of huge infrastructural projects. So when it comes to manpower supply in the construction industry, there is indeed a problem, and the government has to face that. As for the sale of PLH units, I have talked about this in the past. Over 10 years ago, there was a tenant purchase scheme, and the government is not going to reinstate the tenant purchase scheme. Because within a block of building, some of the units would have been sold and some of the units are still under the Hong Kong Exchange. So when it comes to management, there are a lot of problems. You can sell them blocks by blocks. Yes, Mr. Fang, we have also heard some voices like that. In the LTHS, we have set up a framework. That is, we want to diversify the supply of subsidized sale flats. We adopt an open attitude when it comes to different views. We will try to find the best viable way to tackle this issue. Next, Mr. Lee Cheuk-yen, and then Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Chairman, first of all, I hope that a public hearing can be conducted, because I think the public should be engaged in the discussion of the LTHS. And the CTU, or the Labour Department, Labour Party, doesn't think this LTHS is such a good strategy. It's just giving us a batches of figures, and now you're saying that you still don't have sites for 36,000 units, and you don't know if you can find sites for them. So there are still a lot of question marks. You have always told us that it is a problem of land supply. Well, there are sites that are available. How about the Fanning Golf Course? You want to develop Northeast NT, but you don't want to touch the golf course. And how about the military sites? And how about the brown sites in the new territories? Now, if all these sites are available, many PLH units can be produced, and you don't have to usurp lands from other people. After developing the Northeast NT, we just have 6,000 units. Much of the site is not for PLH, it's for low-density luxury housing. So why don't you use the Fanning Golf Course site? And we have talked to the Secretary a number of times. The Secretary has also given us answers just now. All along, you have refused to impose a rental control, but now rental is absurdly high, and there are more and more SDUs. It's increasing at a rate of 30% a year, but you're saying that this problem cannot be resolved right away. We hope that we can achieve our 10-year goal, then this problem can be resolved. But how about the short term? You are not doing anything. And you are just giving us a number of excuses. You are saying that if a rental control is imposed, then there will be rent hikes anyway. And these landlords would have to let their units anyway. If they do not let out their units, why don't you impose a vacant property tax? You are just folding your hands. And you are just waiting for sites to be developed, and you're telling us that 480,000 units can be built in 10 years, but still we do not have sites for 36,000 units. Secretary, I'm not going to repeat my answer on rental control. Maybe Mr. Thomas Chen can shed light on other questions. How about the Shekong site asked by Mr. Vincent Fan? With regard to Northeast NT, well, there is a mistake in figures. Now, we can provide 60,000 units in the future, and 60% of them will be public housing, and the remainder will mainly be high-density private housing, not low-density, as for the military site. The Development Bureau and the Security Bureau have both said that the military site has to be used for national defense purpose. The government is not going to change the zoning now. And according to the garrison law, these sites would have to be used by the Hong Kong garrison, and we need the approval of the central government for the change of such land use. Even if we get such sites back, we have to provide them with other sites, and we have to afford the cost. As for the Fanning Golf Course, we have talked about this many times. Now we are studying the development potential in the North NT. We have also looked at the development potential of the Fanning Golf Course and its vicinity. So in the future, there will be a public engagement exercise, and we will talk more about this in the future. As for brown lands, it means that originally these sites were agricultural sites, and now they are not used for farming anymore. We are having a number of large-scale studies in the NT. That includes the Northeast NT. There are a number of brown sites in these areas. We hope that while we develop the NT in the future, such brown sites can be used. And while we develop the brown sites, some green areas will be kept, and also community facilities will also be included. Well, we'll talk about the public hearing later. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, I agree that a public hearing should be held because the LTHS has a far-reaching impact. Secretary, just now you said that there are 260,000 applicants in the waiting list, but you can't only provide 200. Well, you cannot provide as many units. Well, at least each year you should provide 26,000 units. Then you can cater for such a need. But now you still haven't got sites for building 36,000 units. Even though the waiting list doesn't get longer, you don't have enough units for the applicants in the waiting list. So how can you adhere to the 3-year waiting period? Some 4-member households have been waiting for 4 to 6 years. So for the LTHS, are you still sticking to the 3-year waiting goal? And also, how can you provide enough units each year? I mean, each year you should provide at least 25,000 units. So how can you ensure that enough units can be provided? Today you have been telling us that rental control will have bad consequences. So how can SDU tenants' problem can be resolved? Now they are living in a terrible environment and they have to pay a very high rent. Secretary, when it comes to SDUs, we do not think rental control is a solution because rental control comes with a lot of disadvantages and risks. We understand that SDU tenants are facing a lot of problems. For the SDU tenants, if they're eligible, well, I think actually many of them are already in the PRH waiting list. So for the first offer, the average time is now still 3 years. This is the most fundamental solution. When we look at the relevant figures for households with more members, there may be a problem because we do not have many big units. So that's why the waiting time is normally longer than 3 years. The HA is regularly conducting studies looking at such a long waiting time, and it is hoped that improvements can be made. In the coming 10 years, we propose that 290,000 public units will be built, comprising 200,000 PLH units, and we have not taken into account the 7,000 units recovered each year. So each year we have enough units for allocation. Yeah, it seems that the problem has been resolved according to what you said, but you should ask the HD staff to look closer at the SDU tenants. Now, many of them have been waiting for 6, 7, or even 8 years. Now, after looking at their situation, is there a policy to help them solve the problem? If not, then it just serves no purpose. Now, if the waiting time deviates a lot from our standard or average waiting time, we will definitely look at those cases. Now, maybe the relevant applicants are no longer eligible, or they do not meet the residency requirements, or over half of the household members cannot meet the 7-year residency requirements. So we would definitely look at such cases.
And if it is just an eligibility problem, then it's another matter. KK Fung and then Wu Chi-wai. Chairman, first, I don't accept that we need 480,000 units. Mr. C.H. Tong only said 85,000 for 1 year, so 850,000 for 10 years, and now 17 years have lapsed. Why is it that we need a smaller number of units? And secondly, if $46,000 is the limit for HOS, then at least we need 30,000 PRH or 10,000 HOS, or else we are not going to be able to meet the needs of 40,000 households. As for land, you can say we will build 1 million units. You can say we will give 1 unit to everybody in Hong Kong, but you have to deliver. You can't just say what you are going to do. You are not going for the easier ways to resolve the problem, but you go to places where the density is already high. You go to places which are objected to by green groups, and you don't go to the easier sites. For example, military sites. The ADPL said so 3 years ago, and I'm happy Dr. Vincent Fang agrees. One is Kowloon Tong, the other one Gun Club, and 3 Shek Kong. If you go to Shek Kong, now there is no airport for small planes, and I think you can have 1,000 hectares to build 100,000 units in all these 3 military sites. C.Y. Leung is doing so well with his relationship with the rest of China. Why doesn't he talk to the central authorities? And the basic law says if the military sites are no longer needed by the military will be able to say to government that they can exchange land with the administration. You tell me, what are the military purposes for Kowloon Tong and the gun club and Shek Kong? Why are the barracks empty in Shek Kong? You have to say something to convince me. And redevelopment of PRH, it started with Mackley House. We gave you a list of 32 estates which were over 30 years old, and we told you that 300% of PRH units could be redeveloped on those sites. You identified 20 estates, but what about Aberdeen public housing? What are you going to do about it? We had a meeting with Housing Department talking about Kowloon City public housing, but you only paid lip service. Now you say there will be a 27 billion housing reserve. It's just that you put the reserve into the housing reserve, and then when the budget is read, you give people the impression that there is a smaller surplus. You take the surplus away, and you will tell people that the housing reserve is for housing purposes. Well, don't allow the URA to do redevelopment. You can get land back from the URA and do redevelopment yourself. Maybe you can resume the powers of HA and the URA, or else you cannot do it. You are going to fail in your target of 480,000. I don't need him to answer me because he has a different mindset. He doesn't put his heart into making policies to help the public. You don't go to the easier parts. You can go to the military sites, but you don't. You go to sites where the density is high, and you also propose plans that are objected to by the green groups. Okay, next one, Wu Chi-wai. Chairman, it all boils down to supply and demand. The government says that in the next 10 years they need to build 290,000 units. But we said even if you have land already, you might have to rezone a lot of them before they can be used. So, Secretary, can you give me a breakdown? How much land is already in your hands? How much land will be subject to rezoning? How much land is already in the town planning process? You have to give me a breakdown, or else we will not have any confidence. Secondly, at the development panel today, we discussed the use of government land. And what was said in fact aligns well with what you said in the LTHS, and that is each department is still working on its own. If the land is zoned for a carriageway, it will just be used for a carriageway and nothing else. In many European and American cities, sometimes they have to go underground, they have to go in mid-air because of a lack of ground surface. So they have different levels of services. Maybe you can have public transport interchange underground, and then you can build houses on the ground itself. These may be more effective ways to secure land. You can't just sit there and pray for more land to appear. Number 3, rent increase. It has a relationship with the lack of the supply of rented housing. However, when you talk about LTHS, you are only talking about subsidized sale units. Now, we have a big number of subsidized sale units for which premium has not been paid. If you turn these into a different category of housing, then perhaps we can increase the number of rented housing. So there is an opportunity for increasing rented accommodation. Secretary, you promised us that this will be discussed in the LTHS, but you said that this is a matter of fairness, and so you don't want to take it further. But if we increase rented accommodation, how come you say that is about fairness? In fact, I think it's just the opposite. You can be fair to more people, and there is an opportunity for rent to go down. Why don't you do it? Okay, I will concentrate on part of the questions, and then the PS can talk about land. Mr. Wu Chi-wai talked about HOS for which premium has not been paid. In terms of HOS policy, if we provide subsidized sale units, the purpose is to help people to own their units. This is to help them own housing, not for them to make a profit. If the relevant people want to sublet the unit, they will have to pay up the premium first. In the LTHS paper, we said that we would promote the circulation of existing subsidized sale units. We will try to find ways to revitalize the secondary market. And if HOS owners want to pay up the premium, then they will be able to have a lot more flexibility in using their units. Chairman, the Secretary has not replied to my question. I was talking about the owner having 50 to 60% of the ownership, but because of the present policy, I will not be able to rent out half of the house. I'd like to ask why that has anything to do with fairness. Members, we have to return the room punctually at 4:30, so we have to end our meeting punctually at 4:30. We still have Christopher Chung and another member in the first round, and in the second round we still have 5 to 6 members. I will draw a line there. So first, Christopher Chung. Thank you, Chair. I will make 2 brief points. One, waiting time for PRH. In the community, the residents are telling us that it is not realistic to say they wait only 3 years, whether it be singleton flats or 2-person, 3-person, 4-person flats. Well, I agree with your paper in saying, which is para 11, that you need to attract people to go to remote areas. Can you think about rental concession for these people, because they have to travel far? They also need to spend a lot on traveling expenses. Can you give them some concession in terms of rent? And also, can you be more generous? Say, if people want bigger accommodation, then if they are willing to go to a remote area, then perhaps you should build larger flats in the remote areas so people are attracted. Secondly, redevelopment. Minghua building is actually quite a good example. It is not that the entire estate was redeveloped, or 1/3 or half of the estate will be redeveloped first, and there can be effective decanting within the estate. This will make redevelopment easier and more palatable to residents. I think you should consider doing partial redevelopment with estates over 40 years old. Maybe you should start with building a new building first in the vacant area in the estate, and of course it will cause some trouble and disturbance in the beginning, but it's better actually than for you to go to a minibus terminus and then suddenly build PRH there. And also in paras 13 to 14 of the paper, we say re-establishment of a progressive housing ladder, but that is not apparent in your document. However, I think this is a worthy mission to be considered. A progressive housing ladder is now broken. Over a period of time, there was no HOS, and now HOS is already a different thing. In Shao Kei Wan, some HOS flats are selling for $7 to $8 million. It is like private housing already. So what about the original housing ladder? You should subsidize people who need to rent public housing, and then when they become well-off tenants, they should go to HOS, and then eventually they may go for a private housing unit. I think you should take another look at this progressive housing ladder. Can you rebuild it? Can you give us a a clear picture about this housing ladder. I don't support the TPS because there is a lot of confusion with the public area and also ownership or title. In Choi Hang Estate, the TPS units are selling for $2 million. So in fact, these units are not going to be allocated to the grassroots. The Secretary has only 10 seconds. Let me just say briefly how the HA will tackle redevelopment. It has a plan, but last year the Director of Audit said in his report that from the angle of social interest, we should not undertake large-scale redevelopment at the same time because we are going to freeze a big number of PRH units, and it will be unfair to the waiting list applicants. So we need to be careful in balancing different interests. Mr. Albert Chan. Thank you, Chair. I think I have no confidence in the administration's present effort in searching for sites and building housing. I think it is a dream for them to be providing 480,000 units in the next 10 years. You only look after housing, but then land is under the jurisdiction of Mr. Paul Chan. I don't think you should just sit there and wait. 10 years ago, I said that you always go to where you have advantages. You sided with the Democratic faction when there were advantages to be gained, and now you side with CY Leung. I think this year is a disaster year for housing supply. We only have 9,000 units. This is a record low over the last 20 years. Of course, you don't have to take the entire responsibility. The responsibility lies with Donald Tsang. However, you are faced with this disaster, and now you have the responsibility to make adjustments technically and policy-wise so as to help Hong Kong people in the short and medium term to relieve their housing pressure. You can actively consider something, and I have just written to the CS4A to make this concrete proposal.
The government can think about this. Now we have 400,000 HOS units in Hong Kong, and due to our rigid policy, they cannot give full play to their potential in the market. Now, some of the landlords would like to let them out, but they cannot do that because they cannot afford to pay the premium. So for HOS owners, if they are not required to pay premium, can they let out their flats to green form applicants? And also, you can stipulate that their rental level cannot be higher than the level estimated by the Rating and Valuation Department. So would you consider this proposal? In the LTHS paper, we have already talked about the circulation of the present HOS markets. We would consider different options. So would you consider doing this as soon as possible? Now, for some Tung Chung village houses, now they are also turned into SDUs, and they are rented at a rate of $6,500, and it's just of a size of 100 to 200 square feet. So you don't have to do anything by implementing my proposal. Can you do that as soon as possible so that Hong Kong people in the districts can be helped? Now, this is within your power. Can you give us a promise as soon as possible? This is just a small gesture, and you have all the power to do that. I have already answered the question. Now, you have no feeling at all. You are just being perfunctory. You said that you have answered that question already. I'm telling you that a lot of people are in pain. You are an academic. You should give us promises. Now it's the second round of questions. Shame on you, Anthony Chow. Now we don't have a lot of time. Now we come to the second round, 3 minutes. Wong Kwok Heng, Chairman. I would like to suggest a solution for this structural problem. The FTU earlier on called on the government to consider this. That is for those that are not eligible for PLH, and at the present moment they cannot afford to buy private housing. I'm talking about households with a monthly income of 16,000 to 36,000, and many of them would like to live in their own homes. So can you consider this? Now, while you are talking about diversifying the supply of subsidized sale flats, can you try to solve this structural problem? Well, for increasing housing supply, well, other than producing new flats, we should also make good use of existing flats. So this is also one of the things we are trying our best to do. As stated in the LTHS paper, we have put forward a number of options, and we will also be cooperating with the private sector. Just now, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng said that some groups have certain suggestions. The government would adopt an open attitude and would take all these options into consideration. I hope this can be put in record. I hope the Secretary can seriously consider the FTU's suggestion, and the suggestion is called living comfortably too. For the households with a monthly income of 16,000 to 36,000, they are facing a lot of difficulties. They are not eligible for PLH because they have exceeded the income ceiling, but they cannot afford HOS. So this is a structural problem. I hope the Secretary can follow up on this. Secretary? Chairman? Yes, I've heard Mr. Wong's view. As I said just now, we would adopt an open attitude towards different suggestions. We will look at the feasibilities and the needs in the community. Next, Mr. Chia Wai-chun. As for LTHS, one of the major objectives is to strike a balance between supply and demand. Now, in the past, the government hasn't done enough in land supply. So for the future, when it comes to identifying sites and building units, it will take 11 years. So you have to plan early. So when it comes to land supply, I don't know how the government makes this calculation. I believe there are benchmarks. For example, the average floor size of a unit. If you do not have these figures, how do you know how many size or how big the size you need? And also, can the Secretary tell us more concerning my first question? That is, how will you cooperate with the private sector to increase supply? As for land planning, yes, for major development projects, we need to plan really early. For example, a number of assessments would have to be made, feasibility studies would have to be carried out, etc. Now we are putting forward this 10-year plan. We also hope to start planning as early as possible. In the paper, we have said that we have already secured the necessary sites for building up to 254,000 public housing units. The planning department has its own benchmarks and standards. So for each construction site, they will look at the size and then they would decide as to how many units can be built. Of course, those are rough figures. As for the private sector's force, what we mean is that, well, in the past, we did have a PPP scheme, and also after the handover, there was also a mixed model pilot project. Also, some other countries have implemented different models. We want to find out more about their merits and demerits. As for PPPs, maybe there are also advantages and disadvantages, and we can make improvements. So all these are being considered at the moment. Mr. Thomas Chan, well, for land supply, I can say something. Last week, we submitted a paper to the development panel of the LegCo explaining our multi-pronged approach for supplying more land. Now, for large-scale projects, of course, they will take longer time. In the LTHS paper, we have already mentioned that may take 11 to 14 years. But in the short and medium term, we will review the land uses of certain sites, and we may change the zoning. So we will look at the situations of such sites, and many of them can be developed within 1 to 5 years. At the last policy address is already mentioned that we have 150 sites like this. We hope that before 2018 and 19, redevelopments or developments can be carried out on them. Next, Mr. Frederick Fong, I have two questions. I hope the Secretary can answer them. First, about the military sites. Just now the government said that the military sites should be used for military purpose. So for the Kowloon sites, how can it be used for military purpose? And for the Rifle Club Hill, it was used as a club for the military. So it's not really for military purpose. So for these two sites, they can be used. And for the Shekong site, if you don't use it as a military site and it's no longer a flying zone, then high rises can be built there. So why can't CY Leung talk to the central government? And just now you said that old PLX estates, if you redevelop them, a lot of tenants will be affected. What do you mean by a lot of tenants? I have talked to the resident officials for Waffle Estate. Well, the officials have no idea as to how it can be redeveloped. And there are also other estates like this. If in an area you start redeveloping an old estate, then you will start the whole redevelopments in that area. The government has pointed out 22 estates, but the government is still not doing anything. And how about Daiheng West Estate? And that rich man has already said that he doesn't want to use that. We are talking about 8 blocks, and they are over 50 years old. If you redevelop them, you can build 3,000 to 4,000 units. So why don't you do that? Secretary. Just now, well, when I talked about the military sites, if you look at Annex 5 of the Basic Law, and if you look at the Garrison Law, you will know that this sites, the land use of such sites can be changed. As for redevelopment, the government's position is very clear. We will have redevelopment plans. but we need to consider very carefully before we make public announcements. And it's impossible to redevelop a large number of old estates. Just now you mentioned Taihang West Estate. As you know, it's managed by a private company. As to how the redevelopment plan will be like is still in the hands of this company. How about military sites? And why do you think the rival Club Hill is being used for military purpose? I'm sorry, you don't have enough time. Just now I skipped Mr. Leung Chi-Cheng. Now it's his turn. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the LTHS, now it has put forward a direction which we call supply-led. I think that is correct. However, there are still some flaws. When I look at the figures, well, you're talking about 20,000 private units. Of course, that would also cover some HOS units, but they have been vacant for a long time. Some people suggested that a vacant property tax should be introduced. I'm not saying that this is the definite solution. However, you should have a policy so that such vacant units can be used, because now the market price is really high and such units are not put to good use. But this is not mentioned in the LTHS. It's silent on this point. The FTU also talked a lot about rental control. We are not saying that it's an across-the-board thing. Now, if you have been waiting for PLH for 3 years, can you consider giving those people rental allowance or rent assistance? Now, some members said that now the waiting time is no longer 3 years. Yes, I've heard many residents talking about that. So now with such high rents in the market, what measures can you implement to help these people? As for rent assistance, yes, we've talked about that in the paper. Now, if the government provides a regular rent assistance to the grassroots, it will send a message to the landlords telling them that they can increase their rents. This is not something we want to see. As for the vacancy problem, according to the Rating Evaluation Department, in the private market, the vacancy rate is 4.1%. This is pretty low.
However, is there nothing you can do? If these units can be put out into the market for rental, it would be better. What policies can you take to promote that? If you just look at the vacancy rate, well, there will always be a vacancy rate because it may be in the middle of a transaction or it may be renovated. So there should be a vacancy rate. If it is just at 4.1% now, and judging by international standards, this is not high at all. The last speaker, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, 2 points, Chairman. Number 1, public facility land. Can we have a mentality to put it to multi-use? Because like other countries, because of a lack of resources, we can have a multi-layer kind of development. In other words, you can subsume the roads underground, and then on the ground level we can have housing built, so we can use land in a more effective manner. Number 2, the Secretary said that HOS is for people to own their own house and they should not use it for renting out to make a profit. As you know, the owners hold 50% or more of the ownership depending on the discount, but your policy deprives them of that part of private ownership. From that angle, you should more seriously consider this point. Your policy is depriving the public of their private property right. You should do something about it so there would be more effective use of public resources. Chairman, the purpose of HOS is to help those who want to own their own homes to have a way to do so. This is regulated in the schedule of the housing ordinance. They cannot rent out any part of the unit before premium is paid. They can pay the premium and then they will have full flexibility in using that unit. So are you saying no? I think I have already answered the question. We will try to find different measures to promote the circulation of subsidized sale units. What about the land side? Mr. Chan. Thank you, Chairman. In terms of land supply, one of the major directions is to make the most effective use of land so we can have diversified uses of land. When we rezone public land for housing purposes, we will consider the provision of public utilities at the same time where housing is developed. I can give you some examples. If we have major public infrastructural facility which will also provide land, then we will try to optimize land use. This is what we are considering to do on the artificial island for the landing of Zhuhai Hong Kong Macau Bridge. We are waiting for the Public Works Subcommittee to endorse that plan. I'd like to ask members, just now, some members said that we should hold a public hearing on the LTHS. If you do not object, we will ask the clerk to send out invitation. I think you have received a few motions, one from Fernando Zhang and another one which is an amendment to that by Wong Kwok Heng. I think there is a third one coming in. We are making photocopies now. We will tackle those motions before we go to the next item. Maybe I can invite Mr. Fernando Zhang and Mr. Wong Kwok Heng to brief members on the motion and the amendment motion. Mr. Fernando Zhang, thank you. Now, I don't have the paper with me, but it doesn't matter because I gave it to Wong Kwok Heng. I was saying that there is no specific policy objective in the LTHS, particularly about appropriate and affordable housing. In fact, I can basically support Mr. Wong Kwok Heng's amendment if he can add certain wording to it. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, thank you, Chair. I have taken on board the views of Mr. Fernando Zhang and Dr. Helena Wong. And on the basis of Mr. Fernando Zhang's motion, I have made some amendments. Maybe let me just read it out because I was scribbling on the paper. In view of the jump of 109% of private rental in the last 10 years, and property prices are a record high, but the LTHS just released doesn't include any specific tenancy control policy so that Hong Kong people can have appropriate and affordable housing. This panel is of the view that apart from building PRH, the administration should reconsider and review a tenancy control scheme which is not across the board in order to help those in SDUs so all Hong Kong people can have a suitable living environment. Okay, members, do you agree that now we proceed with the processing of the motions? Well, never mind. Yes, please. Perfect the wording for me. I think you have written a Chinese character wrongly. I mean, two Chinese characters have been written wrongly. Well, thank you very much because I was in a hurry. The clerk will rectify those two Chinese characters. Okay, you agree with the moving of the motion? Any seconder? Okay. Any objection to that motion? Mr. Ip Kwok Him, I'd like to say something. Yes, Mr. Ip. I can't understand what you mean by a tenancy control scheme that is not across the board. I think that will be confusing. The DAB has always said that we should legislate or we should not legislate for a rental control scheme. We said we had reservations. Before that is cleared up, we cannot accept the proposal. Mr. Wong Kwok Hing. When I spoke in the first round, I said already, and I said that was the proposal by FTU, and it is for the consideration of the government. When we say it is not going to be across the board, we mean we are only going to help those who are paying $5,000 or less for renting an SDU. Dr. Vincent Fang, well, I also have grave reservations. If you say below $5,000 and you want to control it, well, if I am paying $3,000, the owner will suddenly hike the rent to $5,001. I think this is a big loophole, so I have grave reservations about it. Okay, you have spoken. Let us put the motion to the vote. Those who object. Those who abstain. Those who support. Okay, let us count the votes, and someone has claimed a division. Okay, I'll ask again. Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh has asked for a division. Those who object again. Those who object. No, you should ask who support the motion first. Okay, those who are in favor. Hands up. Is it that you need to sound the division bell? We do not have to do it. We can record the names without sounding the division bell. No. If people claim a division, you have to ring the bell. You have to ring the bell. No, we are only going to record the names. Those who are in favor. Albert Chan, Fernando Zhang, Leung Yiu Chung, KK Fong, Wu Chi Wai, Wong Yok Man, Wong Kwok Hing, Kwok Wai Kang, and Leung Kwok Hong. Those who object. Vincent Fang and one other. Abstaining, Leung Chi Chang and Ibrahim Sheikh. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary.
我哋下一個議程就係擴展居。
Next item, interim scheme to extend the home ownership scheme secondary market to white form buyers initial assessment. 2 papers. CB, bracket 1384, bracket 04, and bracket 05. I welcome the administration team. Because of time constraint, I will not introduce the administration team one by one. I understand you have the PowerPoint. We all have the PowerPoint with us, and we have the papers. So please be brief. I have to tell members that we have to end the meeting by 4:30, and I will be quite strict with the with time management. A brief introduction, please. Thank you, Chairman. I will take members briefly through the interim scheme and the initial assessment. The scheme itself. In January 2013, it was endorsed by the HA, and the purpose was to allow white form applicants to purchase flats without premium paid in the HOS secondary market. At that time, the HA allowed a quota of 5,000 in 2 batches. The first 2,500, it was pushed out in January 2013, and the second December 2013. And the procedures were that the quota of 5,000 was allowed and the letter of nomination was allowed by the HA. Within 6 weeks, WF buyers can apply for a Certificate of Eligibility to Purchase, or CEP. With that CEP, they can look for a unit in the secondary market and sign a provisional agreement for sale and purchase with the owner. After that, they have to apply for a letter of nomination, or LN, through a solicitor. With the LN, they can sign the proper sale and purchase agreement that completes the transaction. Up till September 2014, 3,983 applicants applied for CEPs, and the HA issued 2,165 LNs, out of which 2,161 transactions were eventually entered into. Until the end of September last year, 750 applicants were still holding valid CEPs, and these CEPs will expire by March 2015. The initial assessment done by the HA is such that with regard to WF buyers, as I said, as at September last year, 2,161 households were able to own their own homes through this interim scheme. And the impact on green farm applicants. Let us look at the 10 years from 2003 to 2012. The average annual transaction in the secondary market was 2,100. After the introduction of this scheme, the average annual transaction rose to 2,810, out of which 1,620 were from WF buyers and the remaining 1,190 were from GF buyers. This table shows clearly the impact. Let us look at column A. Before the scheme, the average yearly was 2,100. They were all GF buyers. After having the scheme, from June 2013 to September 2014, there were 2,161 transactions involving WF, and the remaining buyers were 1,590. In fact, this covers more than a year, and the annual average was worked out. And if we compare the situation before and after the scheme, then we could see that the annualized buyers in the secondary market would rise to 2,814. Indeed, there has been an increase of people who were able to buy HOS in the secondary market, and the annualized WF buyers were 1,621 and green farm 1,193. As for the impact on price, in October 2012, it was announced by the CE, and until June 2014, flat prices in the HOS secondary market rose by 35%. In the same period, the price rose by 22% for private small and medium-sized flats. At the same time, we're aware that property transaction prices are subject to the influence of a number of factors. For example, the supply and situation, public policies and the economy at the time, etc. So it's difficult to precisely say how much of the faster price increase was attributable to the interim scheme.
So that's our initial assessment. The HA thinks that the interim scheme has helped lower to middle-income households to achieve home ownership, met the need of the sellers, and improved the circulation of the HOS secondary market. However, as I mentioned just now, it's still uncertain about the full and exact impact on prices. So for the secondary market, it seems that the price increase is higher than that of the private small and medium-sized flats, but we are not too sure about all the factors. So the Hong Kong Housing Authority will release one more round of 2,500 quota in mid-2015, and then another comprehensive review will be conducted thereafter. So other than releasing more quota, we also agree that in terms of operations, there should be some streamlining. As for the details, you can see them in the annex of the paper. Members, we have to end the meeting by 4:30 sharp. So there will not be a second round of questions. We have Lam Chi-chang, Wong Yuk-man, Zhang Ching-hong, Leung Kwok-hong, Chia Wei-chun. And I'll draw a line here first. And also Mr. Abachan, I'll draw a line here. First, Mr. Lam Chi-chang, and then it's followed by Wong Yuk-man. Thank you, Chairman. 4 minutes. Now, for the white form applicants, well, actually, I have talked to the secretary. I said that the secondary market price will definitely go up, but the secretary said no. Now we see the results. We see the actual figures. Because of this interim scheme, there has been a flat price increase by 35%, whereas in the private markets it's only 22%. So now the HOS flats price has risen faster than the private sector. But now the government telling us it may not be true. Is actually the whole market price has gone up. But the figures do not tell us so. How come the government is still denying? I think the government is trying to cheat itself and cheat the public. You are saying things that we don't understand. You have helped the price to go up, but you said no. And you have no solutions. You're just saying that you will be producing more housing units. That will solve the problem, but it will take 10 years. But how about reducing the rent? You say that cannot be done. You have no initiatives, no measures. So that's why the community is blaming the government. Now it's just hot air. Yes, you are saying that there will be 480,000 new units, but can you really do that? The secretary has left, so I don't know whom I'm talking to. So for this interim scheme, I think you have pushed up some property price, and you deny that. So for the green form holders, how can you help them buy homes? Now, when the Housing Authority Subsidized Housing Committee looked at this, it has looked at a lot of options, whether the interim scheme should be suspended, whether it should be made permanent, and whether there should be another round. If we look at the property price, when it's compared with the private market, yes, it's HOS secondary market price rose a bit faster. Yes, in the initial stage of the interim scheme, yes, it rose sharper. However, after the initial stage, it just changed with the price in the private market. At the end of September, we are talking about a transaction of 2,600. And if you look at the private market in 2013, it's over 50,000. So can these 2,000 odd transactions push up the market price? So we cannot say that the introduction of the interim scheme has pushed up the market price. Well, Secretary, after launching this scheme, well, because for the green farm holders, they would not buy private property. They have to buy HOS, but now they cannot even buy HOS units because they are too expensive. So what I'm asking is how you can help the green farm holders. If you look at the PowerPoints, at the same time, the green farm buyers have also bought units. And also for our new HOS, the green farm holders would have a higher quota than those of the white farm holders. Mr. Wong Yukman, 689 is really shameless, and Mr. Anthony Chang is the same. Now, from August 2012 to June 2014, flat prices in the HOS secondary market rose by 35%, and for the private market, it rose only by 22%. You are saying that we should not overinterpret such figures. You are saying that there are a lot of factors. For example, the economic situation, the supply and demand, etc. That is outrageous. You are not focusing on the issue. So, for the interim scheme, I think the green farm holders are suffering. They don't know when their wait will end. They have been suffering for a long time, and even for those waiting in the waiting list, they really have been suffering. The Chinese term of this scheme is really making me angry. I made this speech when this scheme was launched. The biggest problem with this scheme is that the designer does not really know about this scheme. The secondary market has shrunk. Why is that? Because there's a serious imbalance in the market. Even for the HOS flats, of which the premium has not been paid, they can still sell at a very high price. So the governments can only solve the problem by providing more land. These interim scheme would only serve to raise the property prices. This was what I said in 2012, and I made the right projection. The HOS price has now departed from reality, and even the WF buyers cannot afford them. As for a single person applicant or for WF family, or say for one person applicants, the income and asset limits are 20,000 and 415,000. That's not realistic. This scheme is really absurd. It really cannot help the people who want their own homes. These HOS flats are overpriced. This is really outrageous. As Ms. Emily Lau said, this is extremely outrageous. And now you are trying to whitewash your scheme. When I look at the Chinese name of scheme, I get angry. Do you want to leave them time to answer? How can they answer me? In 2012, I already said this. I remember someone was moving a motion. Let me take up the information. We objected to this interim scheme at this panel. We were concerned about the green farm buyers. And for this kind of interim scheme is totally useless. Don't you see the rising price in the property market? Don't you see it? Don't you see the rate of increase? So for the white farm buyers, if you impose those income and asset limits, how can they afford HOS flats? Chairman, for the interim scheme, it has not increased the housing supply. The buyers are not even eligible for PRH, and now you let them buy public housing. So this HOS market has been abused. This is a market outside the private property market. In the past, there were some successes. So we don't want it to be the same as the private market. So that's why we have imposed a premium. But now with this interim scheme, HOS prices have skyrocketed. And one interim scheme is not enough. You originally had 5,000 quota, but the dropout rate was about half. You said there was about 2,100 that were successful, but about 50% dropout. Why is that? Because the property price has been going up so fast that the prospective buyers were not able to afford them. And now it seems that the 5,000 quota is not enough, and you are adding another 2,500. You will continue to prop up the HOS secondary market price, and it may even go higher. So what's the use of all this? You are not helping in the circulation of HOS secondary market. You are not increasing the quota for GF buyers, only for WF buyers. Some people may be able to afford private flats, but now you give them another channel. So this is totally against the original intention of the HOS. I don't need the government to answer me. I basically object to this. I think this scheme would only serve to push up market price, and it would not help home buyers. I'm not asking the government to help property developers. The government should help grassroots people to improve their living environments. You should focus your effort there. The interim scheme is just a scam. It cannot help people. He said that it does not need your answer. Next, Mr. Kwok Wai-ka. As for the interim scheme, I have different views from other members. I think some people actually benefit from it. If you look at the figures, well, in the past, on the average, 2,100 green farm buyers bought their homes. And with the introduction of this scheme, if you look at column C, you can see that 1,621 white farm buyers bought their flats. As for green farm buyers, the number dropped by 900. So 1,600 people were happy, 1,100 people were unhappy. So it seems that it has served some people. But for the property price, now it has been distorted, because for public housing, they should be bought by people in need. For white farm buyers, they may be people who cannot afford private housing, and now they are given a chance to buy subsidized sale flats. So does it mean that the government admits that the private property price is too high, and now you are sacrificing some green farm buyers so that these white farm buyers can enjoy subsidized sale flats? Well, last round, there were still some surplus places. So why aren't it passed on to the next round of interim scheme?
Would it be 2,500 or 2,800? Whether you do it for an experiment, why don't you use it to the full? P.S. HLS is for green farm applicants to go up the housing ladder, but it has another purpose, and that is for medium or low income families who like to have home ownership. So we have always wanted to accommodate both GF and WF buyers. In the last item on LTHS, in the long term we need to increase supply. Therefore, in the new 10-year target, we are going to increase HOS by 10,000 units. The interim scheme, it's called a Chinese name by the community. It was not a name given to it by the government. We just want to use it to afford another channel for WF applicants to find the accommodation they like in the HOS secondary market. We have never said that the quota should be fully filled. It is, after all, an extra channel. It is up to the applicant to decide whether he has found or been able to select an appropriate flat. We had a quota of 5,000, and we have to wait till March before we know how much is taken up. After discussion, the HA has said that there will be a quota of 2,500 the next time around. This is because the 5,000 quota has not been used up. We'd like to do it another time before we conduct a complete review. We therefore have reduced the quota. Next, Leung Kwok Hong and then Tony Chair. Well, I think the interim scheme is quite idiotic. It was invented by C.Y. Leung. I was on an internet radio program a year ago and I said with this scheme, it would just push up prices because you create the demand, but there is no supply, so people will certainly speculate. Even a parking space in an HOS court is sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Kok Wai Keung, you don't understand this. You are still subject to an income limit. If you use a white form, people can go and buy it. You know, people are speculating even on PRH. If C.Y. Leung is idiotic, just be idiotic himself. Don't draw us into his idiotic pack. We want people to buy HOS, so they surrender the PRH. Now you don't help the HA to find profits in order to or by building HOS. I'm talking now. I'm not talking about the extra 10,000 in the next 10 years. Your original housing policy was like this. People who cannot afford private housing should use a white form to buy HOS, and green form applicants have to surrender their PRH, and then by having income from selling HOS, the HA will have money to build more PRH. But now the entire process is broken up. People are speculating on HOS, and of course that will jack up property prices, you understand? I will say it again. C.Y. Leung is an idiot. He should stop the policy. He should not make another mistake after making one mistake. In this council, everyone understands this simple supply and demand situation. If you create wealth, prices will certainly go up. This interim scheme will be creating wealth. It is creating a bubble effect. If I am a PRH tenant, I want to buy HOS, but I cannot afford it anymore. You remember C.H. Tong's era? He gave a low-interest loan of $600,000 to PRH tenants to buy housing. And we were already taking him to task. Frankly speaking, I in fact supported the demand-side measures. I did not scold him every time he pushed a policy. If after the demand-side measures would create short-term effects, then you should also go for rent control because the pain will be short-lived. Therefore, I'm saying you have no logic. I'm not, in fact, the opposition party. I'm not trying to make life difficult for you. You cannot argue with logic. You cannot argue with the sum of the three internal angles of a triangle being adding up to 180 degrees. So, this is quite idiotic. C.Y. Leung is an idiot. Okay, Mr. Tony Chairman. Now HOS is made available to WF buyers. It is an interim scheme. Like other members, I already said that because of an increase in supply, the prices would be pushed up. Well, of course, there is a point in revitalizing the HOS secondary market, but I already said at that time that you should look into why the transactions in the HOS secondary market was so low, but I think you did not do it. Now, you should evaluate this interim scheme. You should review it. Recently, I asked for certain figures, but they were not given to me. Say who were the buyers, what kind of flats they preferred. No matter how this scheme will evolve, since you have already done it, you should release the data, because you will be assisted yourselves by such data. You will know who the WF buyers are, and you will know which districts they prefer, and also you will know the composition of their households. These will be very helpful data for you to evaluate the housing needs of this batch of people. You will understand why they went for HOS at this time. And this certainly will help you formulate policies for this batch of people. The paper mentions in paragraph 4 that there were 66,000 applicants at the beginning. I don't know how many were found to be eligible after screening. You did not give the figure. Please give it to me. And also the 5,000 quota, some had asked for an extension until March. Now, how many were those? When you collect information, I hope you will gather information for future analysis. Or else you give people the impression that you are wishy-washy about this. I'm sure you know where these people come from, what districts they preferred, and what kind of flats they preferred. I hope you will think about that review at an early stage, because you have to have a basis for review and you need to have the relevant data. When you do your comprehensive review to chart the way forward, you need that data. P.S. I'd like to give certain figures first. Mr. Chair. Well, yes, we had a quota of 5,000. There were 66,000 applications, but then we had to accord the priority for quota allocation by open ballot. So we only had a quota of 5,000, and they were issued in 2 batches. Until now, there are 750 who are holding valid CEPs. And up till the end of December, we know 2,325 people had got the letter of nomination. We believe the vast majority of this would complete the transaction. But then the extension will end only by March, and then they can have another month for the solicitor to complete the transaction. So we have to wait till April. Albert Chan, Chair, C.Y. Leung said that as a surveyor, he did not know how to do surveying, and he was talking about rules attending a certain housing estate. But as a surveyor, and when he was in EXCO, he was skilled in doing valuation and making profits. He was doing that for many consortia, and he was charging prices over and above the average surveying firm. We were quite surprised by the huge fees and charges he was taking. If you say you would not know beforehand that this interim scheme would push up HOS flats or prices, I'm sure you are engaging in political double talk again. So he is a habitual liar. He cannot refrain from lying. He is a pathogenic politician who engages in lying. He is not even happy with providing certain housing supply to meet the basic needs of the public. He would want to do something to push up prices whenever he can. And this is evident from the last 20, 30 years. So if you want to help upgrade the quality of life you should not rough up the market, because if you do something on this side, the other side will also rise. And if all prices would rise, only the developers and professionals will benefit. As you know, C.Y. Leung organized the architects and surveyors of Hong Kong to open up the mainland market, and he was gaining political currency because of doing that. So I hope you will cancel that policy as early as possible, or else the situation will just deteriorate. So my question for you is, at this stage, and also the way forward for this interim scheme, what are your plans? Can you come clean here? In fact, the paper is clear. On the 24th of December 2014, the HA did an interim or initial assessment, and we are going to roll out another batch of 2,500 in the second half of 2015, and then we will make a comprehensive review. But the opposition is very clear. It is a policy disaster because it has pushed up prices. And here at the meeting, many members are asking you to cancel the scheme. The so-called HA assessment, it was done behind closed doors, and then it has arrived at this decision. It is a serious disaster. I'm asking you today, after listening to members, you should consult the public again. You do things strangely. You will make private decisions within government after a private assessment is made. But look at the political impact. You are creating a disaster for the members of the public. Will you reconsider that decision? Chairman, at the HA, there was a detailed discussion on the pros and cons of this policy, and the discussion attended to different angles of the policy. Even if views were diverse, as at the end of September, 2,161 people were able to buy HOS. Well, first of all, you are not an accountability official, but we must regret the HA for working behind closed doors and turning a blind eye to the needs of the public. Two members raised their hands after I have drawn a line, and we have to end the meeting by 4:30. You are Wu Chi-wai and Leung Yiu-chung. You can only have 2 minutes each. Leung Yiu-chung. Chairman, this plan goes against the original HOS policy and objective. This is an undebatable fact. The HOS policy was to help green farm applicants to move away from PRH to HOS and then upward to the private market. That has always been the spirit of this policy. But what you see now here in this interim scheme is that it is a failure, because you can see that the green farm buyers are of a low number, and yet HOS prices are pushed up.
And it's pushed up even faster than the flats in the private sector. We have seen all these figures, and you are saying that, well, there are a lot of transactions. Yes, indeed, there are buyers. However, you are not benefiting the most people. Well, some people may be able to afford it, but most of the people won't be able to afford flats like that. If you insist on implementing this scheme, I don't think it's fair. In 2012, this panel asked that this interim scheme be shelved, but you refused. You said that there will be regular reports, but we haven't seen them. That doesn't matter. However, now you are saying that the HA has already approved another round. I think our members were right, because HA isn't formed with people's mandate, and there was no public consultation. And now the HA insists on doing another round. So would you conduct a new round of public consultation instead of adhering to the decision of the HA? Maybe I can put it this way. Now, after the interim scheme was launched, we said that reviews will be conducted, and in November at HA there was an initial assessment. at present a definite decision cannot be made. So that's why they want to launch another round, and then they can have a comprehensive review. Okay, we got the same answer. Mr. Wuchiwai. Well, we just have 10 minutes left. I don't think we can start the third item. I think the time should be given to us for this item instead. So what is the role of HOS? As any member said, is a property ladder. We mainly hope that PLH residents can afford to buy their own homes. And this is the main goal. However, in the paper, you say that after introducing this interim scheme, the HOS secondary market price has gone up. This is undebatable. And also, when we look at the number of GF buyers, it has gone down. This is something the HA has to face squarely. Why is that? After the introduction of the interim scheme, the number of GF buyers has decreased. This is question number one. And also, I said in the last discussion that for subsidized sale flats, they are subject to a number of policy restrictions. For example, if 40 or 50% of the units in a block have been sold, there are still certain restrictions to the units, and many units cannot be let out. Professor Wang Yuqing had a more detailed analysis of this. Deputy Secretary, members mainly asked you whether there can be a new round of public consultation. Don't just launch the second round of the interim scheme blindly. Yes, HOS is a very important ladder. It would boost the circulation of public housing. However, traditionally, we have both BF buyers and GF buyers. They are both important buyers. So when the HA discussed this, there was a thorough discussion. This was not a decision made behind closed doors. And HOS policy is a very important policy of the HA. The HA doesn't say that this will become a permanent scheme. However, in the initial assessment, it has not gathered enough information or arguments as to whether the scheme should be changed or made permanent. So that's why there's another round. We are not making a decision for the future of the interim scheme. We just want to implement another round because indeed some WF buyers did benefit from the scheme. And the HA has decided that there will be another round, and then there will be a comprehensive review. A report will be made to the LegCo afterwards. Members, this item is added to today's meeting is at my request because the government did not intend to have a discussion with us concerning the second round. So that's why we have 3 items at this meeting. And we have the quota and points system, and we also asked the governments to talk to us about this. So I would like to tell the Deputy Secretary, in the future, if there's any major change in the housing policy or there are major decisions to be made, you have to come to talk to us. You have to listen to our views. Otherwise, the HA has discussed, and then when you come to us, we may have different views. So next time around, please don't bypass us. Chairman, we definitely are not bypassing the Legislative Council. The HA made a decision, but this is not a final decision. It's just an initial assessment. It thinks that it needs more data before a comprehensive review can be conducted. So that's why they want to have another round of the scheme first, and then there will be a comprehensive review. We are definitely not bypassing the LegCo. And I would like to stress that in the future, if the HA makes any major decision, it should come to the housing panel and make a report to us. And thirdly, Mr. Fernando Zhang has tabled a motion, so we will handle this motion first. The next item is on the quota and point system. We will have to talk about it at the next meeting, but at next month's meeting it will also have to end at 4:30, so we would also have to advance the meeting to 2 p.m. next month. I hope the governments can clarify this. In 2012, the housing panel passed a motion that this interim scheme should be shelved, but the government promised us that when there's a review, they will come back to us. But now they are saying that it's an initial assessment, so they don't have to come to report to us. So no matter whether it's initial or final, no matter what, after a review is conducted, you should come to talk to us. Now they are just saying that it's an initial assessment, so that's why they don't report to us. And now you are launching another round. It's totally different from the principle that they put forward in the past. So you have to go back and talk to the secretary. This is wrong on the part of the government. Otherwise, they will do it again. Mr. Wong Yuk-man, I think the government has to give us a concrete answer. So the HA has talked about this, and you should come back to us. You are saying that you are going to launch a second round, and Mr. Leung Yiu-chung made it clear. In 2012, we already talked about this, and I also repeated the salient points of my speech in that year. We objected to this back then. So now Dr. Fernando Zhang is moving this motion. It is useless. It was put forward last time. We asked them to shelve. Now why do you ask them to shelve again? Why don't you move another motion? That is for anything that's decided or discussed by the HA. It should be discussed by us here. We talked about this in 2012 already. So what's the use of being a legislator? We talked about this every year. We only have 5 minutes left, members. It's the same thing. Last time we asked them to shelve it already. Thank you, Mr. Wong Yuk-man. Dr. Fernando Zhang's motion is tabled. So are we going to handle this motion? Dr. Fernando Zhang, do you want to explain this? No? We just have 5 minutes left. Well, this is very simple. We just asked the government to immediately shelve the interim scheme. Now let's vote. For those who are for the motion, please raise their hands. I ask for a division. Please raise your hands. For those who say yes, Albert Chan, Fernando Zhang, Leung Yiu-chung, Hu Chi-wai, Wong Yuk-man. For those who are against, please raise their hands. Are you for or against, Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan? For those who are against the motion, Low Wai Kwok, Kwok Wai Keung, no abstention. The motion is passed. Deputy Secretary, for any review like this in the future, you have to come back to our panel and let us have a detailed discussion. Otherwise, things like that of today will happen again. You have asked her 3 times. She hasn't answered. Chairman, I have already said just now, because this was an initial assessment made by the HA. It's not a comprehensive review. But of course, we heard members' opinions. So it's an initial assessment. However, in 2012, we passed a motion. You ignored our motion. Next time, we will continue. Mr. Wong Yuk-man, please let me finish. I only have 2 minutes. For any decision made by the HA, you have to come back to our panel so that we can have a discussion here. Any other business? If not, we will adjourn the meeting now. Our next meeting will begin at 2 p.m. We will be talking about the quota and points system.